The words history and heritage are sometimes confused and even used interchangeably. While closely associated, they are different. Our history is everything that happened in our past, documented and undocumented, while our heritage is what remains of the past in the present. The concept is an extremely wide one, covering many different areas, which many of us do not even recognize as our heritage. This lecture will break down the concept and discuss the different ways in which we can look at and learn about our heritage. When we travel through Jamaica, we see many buildings, churches, schools, aqueducts, waterways, great houses, forts, and monuments that were built hundreds of years ago. And these we readily recognize as part of what is described as our tangible heritage. There are also similar items which also fit into this category, such as works of art, artifacts, paintings, sculpture, coins, and manuscripts. Some of us may even have some of these items which might have been privately owned. The Institute of Jamaica has benefited significantly from donations of such items. There are also archaeological sites, cities, villages, shipwrecks, underwater ruins, which are examples of tangible heritage, and Seville in St. Anne, Port Royal, Spanish Town, Falmouth, and downtown Kingston immediately come to mind as prime examples. The other aspect of our heritage, which is less recognized and often taken for granted, is our intangible heritage, which refers to the traditions and living expressions that are transmitted from one generation to the next by way of tradition or oral history. Our music, which is celebrated across the globe, is one important example of this. And we have a host of other examples, such as the use of our herbs, our language, our dance, our stories, including our many proverbs, and of course, our cuisine. The most well-known examples of the latter are our jerk and ackee and saltfish. And for this presentation, I should include blue clothes. There is also the natural heritage of a country, physical and geological formations, forests, islands, lakes, caves, and mountains, our world-famous Blue Mountains and Dunn's River Falls, biological formations which include habitats of endangered species and animal species, the swallowtail butterfly and the yellow snake, coral reefs, tropical forests, and wetlands. The artifacts, traditions, and practices highlighted in this lecture represent a small part of the tangible and intangible heritage of Jamaica and are drawn from all periods of known occupation of the island, beginning with the Taino people.
Vivian, it is my privilege to be able to share this evening, delving into the rich and diverse heritage of our island with somebody as knowledgeable as you.
You are very, very kind. Next year will be the centenary of the establishment of Grace Kennedy, and it's hard to believe a business company doing so much for the heritage of our country. Just some 3 weeks ago, I heard the chairman of Grace Kennedy, Professor the Honorable Gordon Shirley, speaking about the development plans, what is going on at Port Royal, and he said something very significant, that we have to tell our story and not allow other persons to tell our story for us. And it echoes what Marcus Garvey said, a people without the knowledge of their history, their origin, their culture, is like a tree without roots. So heartiest congrats to Grace.
But Vivian, what is also interesting about Grace is that their original headquarters, 64 Harbour Street, has been preserved and is very much a part of their whole establishment on Harbour Street in downtown Kingston.
Well, across from Harbour Street, the corner of Hanover and Harbour Street, in 1799, a very significant situation happened because there was a courthouse there.
I see. Uh-huh.
And Britain and France were at war. And a British captain saw a ship, and they interrogated the person on the ship. He said he was American and was carrying American goods. And he was at the courthouse, yes. And just as he was going to be set free, the captain of a British ship came in and said, no, man is not American, he's a French man, because he threw something overboard. Shark swallowed it. They caught the shark, opened it, and saw the papers. They were French papers. Believe it or not, just around the corner, at the National Library where you worked, 1799, those papers, preserved.
I have seen them.
Oh,
I remember them very well.
Right? So
And I have also
preserved.
seen the shark jaws.
The jaws at the Natural History Museum, preserved, which goes to show, echoing what the chairman of Grace Kennedy said, and Marcus Garvey, the preservation of our heritage.
And the National Museum is also a part of the Institute of Jamaica, of which you are executive director, right?
Well, you are very generous, yes.
But I understand that you have artifacts at the National Museum which go back as far as the Taino period.
Yes, we do, and it's very interesting that you say that, because they were our first inhabitants, and the signal, this Grace Kennedy presentation, is pointing to our country, is seeing the commonly unseen. We are walking, we are retreading into steps that our ancestors had walked before, and we don't realize. White Marl. Do people realize that the Tainos, it was once a Taino settlement? And at the National Museum of Jamaica, I'm so glad you mentioned it, there are two carvings, huge carvings, one called Boynal, a huge 35 inches high, the bringer of rain, and the Birdman. The Tainos carved that, and they were found at Carpenter's Mountain, now part of Manchester, then part of Vere, by British people who were checking out the area. And this was 1792. And they took them to the British Museum. They are now in the British Museum.
So what do we have here?
What we have here is a replica, because when we requested it from the British Museum, they sent to us replicas. Instead of keeping the replicas and sending the original to us, they sent the replicas. And the Honorable Minister, Olivia Grange, she has started the process for repatriation of those objects, because they are a part of our heritage. And I hasten to say, as a follow-up to that, Sir Philip Sherlock, that outstanding Jamaican, first Jamaican to be Vice Chancellor at the University of the West Indies, and second West Indian, he said when he was a child at high school, he asked his teacher, sir, he's a British teacher, couldn't we learn some more about our Jamaican heritage and our West Indian heritage? The headmaster looked at him and said, boy, you have no history.
And he, of course, changed that, because he was one of the first people to write.
We are meeting here this afternoon.
Exactly.
At this lovely space, Alhambra Inn, with all this memorabilia. And I have a feeling that the persons who own here are related to Sir Philip.
I also have that feeling. But tell us some more. I know that there are many other interesting artifacts and objects in not just the National Museum, but also the National Library of Jamaica that represent.
Oh, the National Library. Well, that space, when I step from the Institute and going along Harbour Street, there's a feeling, here am I walking in the footsteps of Mary C. Cole, born 1805. She helped in the Crimean War, and she is the first black woman for whom a statue was unveiled at St. Thomas Hospital in London in 2016, commemorating her contribution to world health. So remember that lady born right there at East Street.
And she did a great deal for healthcare in Jamaica as well.
Oh yes, the cholera of 1850.
Cholera and of course yellow fever as well.
Yellow fever, she did quite a lot for that. God bless her.
2 major pandemics, and now we are having yet another in terms of the COVID.
We are having the COVID. And the message that is telling us that we will survive. Don't worry about a thing, for everything is going to be all right. That song is a part of our intangible heritage.
Oh yes, very much so.
Bob Marley.
But Mary C. Cole wasn't the only wonderful, well-known nurse that we learned about in history, is she?
No, we learned about Dr. Cicely Williams. But even before we get to Dr. Cicely Williams, and I'm so glad you said we learned about in history. When we go to London and we pass by Trafalgar Square and we look up at the monument to Lord Horatio Nelson, not many Jamaicans know, or even people in the world know, that when he was in Jamaica at Port Royal, stationed at Port Royal, he went to Nicaragua. And on his way back to England, he couldn't make the journey. They had to leave him at Port Royal, sick. And who nursed him to perfect health? Cuba Cornwallis. And also those people are living up in Cooper's Hill. Some of them know where Lord Nelson lived. He lived up there in Cooper's Hill. And although he was sick, he was looking out at sea at Port Royal to see if the French were coming in to invade Jamaica. Cuba Cornwallis, that nurse, restored him to perfect health. And I said elsewhere recently that when Nelson went to England, he told Prince William about Cuba. And he met Cuba, and Cuba gave him some...
This is Prince William?
Yes. And what we in Jamaica would say, some rubber.
So Prince William came to Jamaica?
Oh, he came, he's the first royalty to come. And when he returned, he told his wife, he got married, Queen Adelaide, after whom a street in Spanish Town is named, Adelaide Street.
Yeah, I know that.
And she sent a dress for Cuba. Cuba said, oh, this is too beautiful to be worn. She should be buried in it.
So she's still wearing it.
That's a beautiful one.
But when I think of people like Cuba Cornwallis and Mary C. Cole, and I think of the demand, the global demand even that our nurses enjoy now, I think it is that spirit of adventure, that spirit of nurturing and caring that has been passed down to the 20th, 21st century Jamaicans who are still migrating, still spreading.
They make a significant contribution. And a link, I don't want us as Jamaicans to forget that link with the prince, because Prince William became King William IV. And he signed the apprenticeship bill in 1834. That same man who came to Port Royal and got some healing from Cuba, he signed it in 1834. And guess what? In 1838, the person who succeeded him, Queen Victoria, signed the Emancipation Bill.
I know we're going to come to that in some more detail a little later in the conversation. But I know in addition to the National Library and the National Museum, there is the Natural History Museum, which...
Oh, the flora and fauna.
The flora and fauna, right.
I see where Alhambra is capturing the orchid, endemic orchid, found nowhere else on planet Earth in Jamaica. And I have a long list here. I hope time will allow us to share.
I
Because
know
it's
the
too much to tell.
Portlandia is not, is
Oh,
still,
the Portlandia. I'm so
Yes.
glad you mentioned it. That plant is found nowhere else on planet Earth. And we have a plant at the Institute of Jamaica.
I
the
remember it
Naturalist
well,
Museum, we
I
saw
remember it well.
And that plant was first identified in Clarendon. Hi there, Clarendon. And its name is called Portlandia because it's named after the Duchess of Portland, who was governor at the time, and whose son, the link, is named Titchfield, after whom the school is
named.
In terms of our flora and fauna, believe it or not, in Jamaica, according to Mr. Karen Campbell from the Naturalist Museum of the Institute of Jamaica, we have 60 orchids found nowhere else on planet Earth, 67 ferns, 7 palms found nowhere else on planet Earth. They're all endemic. Land snails, we have 50. Spiders, 20. Fireflies, 45. Butterflies, 20. And 6 found nowhere else on planet Earth. Land birds, 30. And of course, the giant swallowtail butterfly, endemic to Jamaica.
The yellow snake.
The yellow snake.
The yellow
And
snake.
since we are talking about this, I want us to look to Hanover. King students say Hanover, but Mr. Eric Frater, former headmaster of Rossi, says it's Hanover because it's a German word. So we learn as we go along that there is a place in Hanover called Dolphin Head Mountain.
I've heard of it,
They
certainly.
have 23 plants there found nowhere else on planet Earth.
Another wonderful piece of natural heritage that we celebrate is Kingston Harbor. I understand it's the 7th deepest harbors in the world, so we are indeed proud of that. We have so many things to celebrate in Jamaica. Let us take a quick trip across this natural wonder and spend just a little time in Port Royal as the most historic, one of the most historic places in the world.
Yes, and we did mention about Lord Nelson there.
Right.
Cooper Cornwallis there, and it was once described as one of the wickedest places on earth. And we know of the earthquake of 1692, and we know that the grave of Louis Galde is there at the St. Peter's Church, and so much history about it. And again, Professor Shirley,
Right.
what they are doing, they're all Jamaicans. It's going to be the must-see place that the development they are doing for Port Royal. So you're going to have Port Royal then and now. And as you mentioned Port Royal, oh, you are just so terrific. There was a gentleman living at Port Royal, and he came with the Duke of Albemarle. He came to be the Hans Sloane, Dr. Hans Sloane.
Yes.
He was an Englishman, but he studied medicine in France. And when he was leaving France to go back to England, his tutor said to him, when you go to England, there's a Dr. Sydenham there. You should link with him. And Dr. Sydenham introduced him to the Duke of Albemarle. So he came to Jamaica in 1689 to be the doctor for the Duke of Albemarle. You now know how Sydenham in St. Catherine got its name.
I had no idea
And
before.
in Spanish Town, Monk Street is where Dr. Hans Sloane lived. And Monk is the name of the Duke of Albemarle. And while he was in Port Royal, you spoke about, he got introduced to chocolate, what we know as cocoa. In Portland, we say chocolate. In Kingston, I suppose you say cocoa. Cocoa. And he collected, Dr. Hans Sloane, he went into the St. Catherine Hills, and he collected quite a lot of flora and fauna. We just read some of them, took them back to England, and Miss Maxine, believe it or not, they were used for the founding of the British Museum.
Let's wend our way up to the Ligonier Popine area, which was once called the Hope Estate.
Thank you so much for that observation, because you know that Major Hope came with Penn and Venables
Did he?
on the ship which captured Jamaica from the Spaniards. And those of us who like to turn up our nose at places below Crossroads should know that Penn and Venables lived in Jonestown. And when you go to Jonestown, you'll see Admiral Penn Street and Nelson Street. But Major Hope, you will notice that the Hope River and any place with Hope.
Hope Gardens.
Road, Hope Gardens, Old Hope Road. And as you say, Hope Gardens, next door to Hope Gardens, you have now University of Technology, was once farm school,
Is that
where
so?
Dr. T.P. Leckie was able to develop 4 breeds of cattle for tropical conditions. But speaking about Papine, we should speak about that the Duke of Chandos, he acquired the Hope Estate, and George Frederick Handel, the German British composer, was court composer to the Duke of Chandos. And George Frederick Handel, we sing, especially at Easter, the Hallelujah Chorus,
Yes.
which we all know.
Composed by Handel.
He composed that, so he benefited from Jamaica, George Frederick Handel. And
So it was Jamaican funds that financed
well, of course,
the
he
composition.
contributed in some way to that. And as we say the Hallelujah Chorus, we should link that with Peter Tosh. Jah
Of
is my
course.
keeper. Because in 2019, our own Jamaican, Bishop Rose Hudson Wilkin, was consecrated as the first female black bishop, Canterbury Cathedral, and Jah is my keeper was sung. And Peter Tosh was a member of the Rastafarian faith, and you know that the Rastafarian religion is the world's latest religion, given to the world by Jamaica.
By Jamaica. But it's so interesting that the genius of Handel should be combined with the genius of Peter Tosh, and then, of course, the consecration of so it really is a very powerful symbol of the importance of religion
And music.
and the church and music.
And Bob Marley cannot be left out.
No.
Because we know that everything is going to be all right. Because the BBC declared his song One Love as the song of the century, and Time magazine declared that the album Exodus as the album of the
which we're
millennium.
so proud. But before we leave the Duke of Chandos,
Yes.
isn't there somewhere called Chandos Place in
Right
Papine?
beside the gas station there, so that when you pass there
It's a
next time-
lane, is it?
Yes, it's a lane, Chandos Place. A beautiful story, believe it or not. 18, my grandmother told me this, 18 persons from Moortown in Portland. They left Moortown 3 a.m., walked to Fellowship, took the raft across, and they reached Charlestown 11 a.m. They ate, they slept, woke up 3 a.m., went up the Buff Bay Valley. I never forget her telling me she saw a white soldier, and now realized that they had reached Newcastle, then to Papine. They took the tram, 3 days in Kingston, walking. They traveled by night. Why? It was cooler. And I asked if there was no fear. The only fear was Duppy, but they rubbed themselves with some white rum. And it seemed Duppy is afraid of that. No fear. This
No
was
fear.
a time, no fear.
And before we leave, one last stop in the Hope Estate area is the University of the West Indies.
Wow.
The chapel. Like,
Yes.
there is a very interesting story that you shared with me about the chapel at the University of West Indies.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and we remember with gratitude the outstanding contribution of the student who was told, boy, you have no history, because he came to be the person who was the coordinator after the Institute of Jamaica decided that there is need for a University of the West Indies. And Sir Philip Sherlock, he left his job as executive director. And
Which you now have.
oh, wow. You're very kind. And he went on these journeys to England. Sir Philip had gone there to speak with Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's last granddaughter, who became Chancellor of our university.
Of course.
And she, when she came to Jamaica, she always went on the north coast to do some holidaying. and she went to the Gale Estate, Trelawney, and saw this ruins. It was a sugar estate, and spoke with the owner, Kelly Lawson, that it would be better served as a chapel at the University of the West Indies. So stone by stone, sponsors paid the way, it came across, and the rest is now history.
That is.
Can you imagine? They built by our enslaved ancestors, and we now worship there. In my country, they would say there is a God.
Indeed, and as we talk about our enslaved ancestors, Spanish Town.
Yes.
Spanish Town is so integral to our heritage. And why is it so important? You tell us.
Well, there is a space there that we just pass and we don't see it, we don't notice it. In fact, in 2007, when we went there to put up a plaque to commemorate what I'm about to say, there was a man selling cane and guinea, and he just threw the trash. Before the very space and if there's anything coming out of this lecture, is for some respect to be paid to that space. If there's anything coming out of this lecture. And farther up the road is the cathedral, which became a cathedral in 1824, Anglican Cathedral. But beside it is a church hall. And in that church hall, in 1894, what we know today as the Jamaica Teachers Association, in that space, the Jamaica Union of Teachers, founded by a Mr. W.F. Bailey, who was from Wallaston, Manchester, and he founded the Jamaica Union of Teachers. It's not so long ago because his daughter, Amy Bailey, Honorable Amy Bailey,
we know
we all remember
that name very well.
And she incidentally became the first female of the Jamaica Union of Teachers, JTA. All those ladies teachers who are now members should know the first female was Amy Bailey.
So it was first the Jamaica Union of Teachers, the JUT,
and then
which
JTA
evolved into the JTA.
And they lobbied that our ancestors should not pay to go to what we call today primary school. My grandmother told me she paid a penny a week.
I didn't know we paid
penny
ever
a week
for primary school.
And the equivalent, one of the youngsters here asking me, penny. I said, yes. She said a penny was the equivalent of a pound of beef.
That was a lot.
No beef soup for him tonight.
Vivian, anyone who knows, even if they don't know you personally, and they know the name Vivian Crawford, it is associated with your heritage, individual heritage now, of the Maroons. You are, I know, a proud Maroon.
I am a proud Maroon, but you said people who know me. People who know me know that I'm a very shy, quiet, and soft-spoken person. So how Grace Kennedy was able to get me out, I'm indebted to them for this opportunity. I was born in Moortown, Crawford ancestry, and McGregor. And by the time I was 9 years, I knew all that they were supposed to know about my heritage. Children were seen and not heard, but we heard what they were saying.
And you heard the oral
history. And where Nanny is buried, that's where we did all the playing. It's called Bump Grave. Yes. And
you had that privilege to
I had
play
that privilege.
By Nanny's grave.
Yes, Nanny's grave. And we heard the story how Nanny, again, another journey, walked from Moortown through the middle of the island to St. Elizabeth, a compound, to tell her brother Kodra, do not sign the treaty. The reason being...
That is, yes, of course, that's at the time of the war.
The reason being, why you shouldn't sign the treaty, you're signing treaty in a language you do not understand. And there is a part in the treaty which says that enslaved should be returned to the British.
How did she know that?
God in heaven knows. In Portland, they would say she can't say far. So she went to tell her brother that. But in the end, the wranglings, that they eventually, the British made peace with her. And the last war she fought with them was at a place called Seaman's Valley. In 2017, I was in Parliament when Honorable Mike Henry read an apology from Oxford University Press that they had not been publishing enough about the contribution of Nanny in terms of their heritage. And I'm not the only person who heard that.
Oh, that's amazing.
2017, yes.
That's amazing.
Yes, yes. Because you know, Honorable Mike Henry, like Honorable Olivia Grange, they are in the, I nearly said battle, they are in the struggle for repatriation and reparation. Right.
Two important words
yes, yes.
in our
so
history.
Nanny, and I see you have here some memorabilia.
I see you have here some memorabilia.
Yes. Now, you, the strategy that the Maroons use, all the Maroons, because there is Moortown, Accompong, Flagstaff, Charlestown, that the vine of this pod here, called Carcoon, that's what they use to camouflage themselves.
Really?
And, yes, they camouflage themselves, and so they would dig a hole and they would cover it. And so the British, and they would put a string on some trees and pull it from a distance, and the British would be focusing that way and walking almost stealthily, and then they drop in the hole.
Misdirection.
Misdirection. So the strategy is called guerrilla warfare.
Of
you
course.
cannot face the enemy because you don't have guns. So they cover themselves with it and don't underestimate
So that
this.
makes us sort of die?
No. This is a bean from it, Carcoon. This is the pod. And after it drops, and after many weeks, you collect this, 30 or 40, and you burn it like chestnut, and you get off this tough cover. Then you slice it. You put it in what you call burlap. We call it crocus bark.
Okay.
Put it in a stream because it's poisonous. And then you slice, boil it, and throw off the water the way you do ackee. And then with coconut juice and janga. You know what janga is?
Very well.
And that's it. And this, I suppose you have what you call China plate. This was their China plate. This would be for a child, the adult so larger. And what this one is, you don't know. Say no.
Something that you keep tobacco in?
No, you're nearly. School challenge. This is called a tender box. Dried wood in here. And then what is this called? You don't know
A
this
piece
one?
of rock?
Yes. You are
But
brilliant.
what
Flintstone,
specifically? Flintstone. Okay.
And then with this, and the sparks, and you get the fire.
Okay, so
And
that's
you're
your
able to light the
lighter.
fire. We didn't have your box of matches. And then you would cover and put it out. And then this is Jamaica's. You
That
use this
one
to track
we
it.
know.
This is the first cell phone.
Oh, I thought it was their bang.
Then the first cell phone. Because you use it to make communication.
Yes.
If there was a meeting, you're going to meet at a place called a Sappho House. There is a special sound.
I see.
If there is tragedy, like someone drowned, someone has been to the field and hasn't returned, there is another sound. And
There's a complete language.
a complete language. Excellent. And on Christmas Eve, when the first bus or truck comes in from the market 10 miles away, it is sounded. And when it is sounded, Christmas begins.
I
Christmas
see. So
Eve,
as a boy, you were waiting for that
And
sound.
Christmas ends March.
Explain that, please.
Christmas ends March. Because by that time, all the meat that was put over the kring would have finished. You know what a kring is?
No.
School challenge.
No.
It
No.
was a mesh. It's a mesh. And long before metal mesh, they used the bark of the maho tree and built a bag, made a bag, and they put it over the fire, and the smoke from it dried the meat.
Okay, and cured the meat.
Cured the meat. So whenever they are cooking, they slice off piece to put it into the pot.
So was that tradition still alive when you were a
Oh, no,
boy?
not at all. In fact, they cut firewood, and which they started cutting firewood in November, because in Christmas you could never let the angels see you cutting wood, so you would pack it up. So it finished about March.
Oh, I see.
It would finish about March. Hence, by March, all the provision that you would have made for Christmas. But I don't know if it is peculiar to Moortown, but other rural communities in Jamaica. Well, most rural communities would have those things.
Okay. Well, this is such a fascinating journey.
And you know what this is, of course?
Yes, in fact, I have a ceramic reproduction of that.
A ceramic?
Ceramic reproduction I bought at Mustard Seed. You know, Mustard Seed at one point.
Oh, yes. Oh,
they
yes.
They were replicating and trying to keep the traditions alive.
What do you know the name that they call it in terms of the heritage? What do you call this? Don't tell me it is called a lamp.
Can't remember.
Kitchen bitch.
Kitchen bitch. Of course.
Please don't call it kitchen dog.
Vivian, so far our discussion, which is so fascinating, has been driven by primarily the tangible heritage. I'd love us to look very briefly at our intangible heritage, especially where language is concerned. Around the end of the 19th century, moving into the 20th century, Jamaican writers came into their own. At least there was a beginning of writings by Jamaicans about Jamaicans, and some in Jamaican language.
Thank you so much for that observation, because that's what they call self-actualization, that we become our own.
Exactly.
And it echoes what was told to Sir Philip Sherlock, boy, you have no history. Because in teaching, we are taught, teach from the unknown, the known to the unknown. Teach from the known to the unknown. Regard every child as a king or a queen, because you do not know which one is going to wear the crown. And the language, the child's first language, thank God, UNESCO has now recognized that your first language is your language that you start the child with. And we owe a debt of gratitude, as you said, to those pioneers who defied others and started to write in our own language. How many more scholars we would have had today if they were allowed to express themselves in their own, on our language? Claude McKay, Miss Lou, etc.
In North America, in London, and in many other centers where there are large Black populations and population of people who descended from the enslaved, there is a raging debate on what to do about statues of people they consider their oppressors. I don't think we could possibly end a conversation on heritage without touching on that very briefly.
Every time we see those statues, we are hurting. And it is best to say we don't want to see them. My personal opinion, and I'm speaking on behalf of no organization, but if I'm allowed human rights, those statues should be removed and put into a private space so that we can know what they contributed to make the world not a better place. Therefore, they should not be destroyed, because in destroying them, you are destroying the evidence. And a generation yet unborn will not know what happened. Jamaica, we're far ahead. We removed statues long before some others are doing it now. And we have in no way said that we shouldn't remember those persons. But we point to them to say, you did that. Therefore, the next generation, that is not the path you should travel. And that is a person.
Yes. And in addition, post-independence, we have also started to celebrate our own local heroes.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. And we are grateful to them and their contribution to nation building, because just yesterday at a presentation I did in Birmingham, in 1916, our Jamaicans, our ancestors, went to the First World War.
There you go.
To die for king and country. And people will say this is so far away, but those persons, their ancestors are still around today. And in the parish capitals, they have what is called the cenotaphs, the memorial. Our ancestors gave their lives and they suffered persecution because of their complexion. There were some titles they couldn't get, but they served.
They served.
They served.
They served.
And we should not forget them. At the Heroes Park, or National Heroes Park,
yes,
there is a memorial
to
them.
To those who fought in World Wars One and Two.
Yes.
1 and 2, certainly. And if we
remember that one of our national heroes, he was in that war. Right Excellent Norman Manley. First World War, and his brother died in that war. And people who pass by Constant Spring, after you pass the police station, there's a place here called Wortley Home, where Wortley, he built that space. He and his son were building the space to take care of children whose parents couldn't take care of them. The son went off to war and died at the Battle of the Somme. And he named the place Maurice Hill, just by Constant Spring, and there's a Wortley Home there now.
I know, yes.
We pass the places and say, well, I didn't know that.
Well, after this evening, very many people will not be saying that anymore because you have told us the story.
And that is through the generosity of Grace Kennedy.
But listen, the Jamaican spirit is something. Our resilience, our creativity, our forwardness, the world is amazed at what we, this people of this small island, what we have achieved. And, I think much of it is symbolized in your favorite part of this lecture, the sayings and the proverbs. We have learned so much in terms of attitude and good sense from those sayings and proverbs. And Vivian, I want you to share some of your favorite sayings and proverbs, because right now in this COVID pandemic, enough away I take kinteed, cover heartburn.
Our ancestors were not exposed to formal education as such, and yet they were able to build a community devoid of crime and violence, because they insisted, especially with the children, on attitudes, values, and attitudes and interpersonal skills, especially among adults. I have prepared here a list of my favorites. It's a very long list. It will take about 3 weeks to finish the presentation. But I share with you some of my favorites.
Please.
Exercising caution when you are going to take a decision. You cannot go to shop to buy and you don't have money. That is obvious. If monkey going to buy trousers, he must know which part thing go and put him tail. So if you don't have anywhere to put the tail, don't buy trousers.
Don't buy the trousers.
That's obvious. Tie your toe before you cut. If cut, means you must be careful. You must make provision so that you don't get hurt. We now wear masks. We keep social distances so that we do not hurt others, we do not hurt ourselves.
As we are doing.
As we are exercising here now.
Doing now.
Here's another one. John, this is again caution. Janko say, him don't work on Sunday. If you think I like kill him, I go. So if Janko tell him don't work on Sunday, are you going to believe Janko? No. Kill him, I go. You think Janko is going to pass it? Now this one I just love because this was shared with me by my cousin Vivian Crawford. There is a tradition in Jamaica, intangible heritage, where at 9 nights you serve tea and coffee, fish, 9 nights.
And white rum.
And white rum. You know why the meal is served at midnight?
No.
Because if you serve it earlier, the people eat and leave. So it's served at midnight. But at midnight, they sing a song. Rata look upon the shearer. Rata say him no want no tea. Why Rat didn't want any tea?
Because it's Puss.
Puss was sharing the tea. A Puss would eat rat. Now this one is about child rearing. If you can't hear, you will feel.
That one I know very well.
And Baffan, that is a clumsy picnic, same can't run. A child who is clumsy and disabled, you would call the child, is at home all the time. The reason why the child was pretending to be disabled, it didn't want to be sent on errands. But guess what? When the house caught fire, that was the first child to run out. And another child rearing, and this was told to me by my mother, who said her grandmother said this: I don't bring grand picnic, I bring picnic. So she was not scolding grandchildren because they are not hers.
Her responsibility.
They're not her responsibility. And some interpersonal relationship, tenancy not spoil dance, interference does. You know what that one means?
What was that first word?
Tenancy not spoil dance.
Oh, tenancy.
Not spoil dance, interference does. Don't rush into things. It's better to wait and see the outcome. It's not your business.
Right.
How the antenk in a Bruckner Square.
That one is a
showing good manners doesn't hurt.
A popular one.
Thanks to Miss Charmaine for that. Crab, I love this one. Crab say, don't trust any shadow after dark, because every shadow is a man and every man is a damn rascal. Why Crab say that?
Because crab hunting happens at night.
Aye. And so is men hunting crab. And my mother told me this one: not every shut eye is sleep.
A lot of pretense.
Pretense. Wow. My uncle told me this one: nobody shakes an empty tree. Whenever people are calling on you, it's because they need something. If they didn't need something from you, they wouldn't be calling on you.
Or
so
maybe because you have something of value.
That they want.
As
so
you're
nobody
doing
shakes
this
an
evening.
empty. Oh no, that's the least. Nobody shakes an empty tree. Oh, this is a beautiful one. It is not want of tongue why cow not talk. It has a large tongue, but sometimes you must cover your eye. Keep silent.
Keep silence is golden.
Yes. Marga Kawa Pasta Bull Mama. You know that one?
Yes. I
What does it mean? What would you say? Explain to the scholars. This is my food and this.
It means that you never know who somebody is related to. It may well be a poor woman walking along the street, might well be the mother of a very important person, influential person.
And thank you. And the final one, my brother told me this one, that chip is a bird nearly as small as a hummingbird. It's a very small bird. And it walks in a very careful way. It walks very, almost stealthily. And the birders ask, why are you walking like that? He said, if he walks any heavier, the earth will sink. And that is for those of us in life who are too pleased with ourselves. We are too pleased with ourselves.
Vivian, I don't know how to thank you for this really profound, interesting, fascinating story. We don't have to end. You can continue telling us your stories. We would love that. We are in no hurry to leave.
Another time, yes.
So please, I invite you now to share your wrap-up.
I want to say to the people of Jamaica, to the world, the past is history. The future is a mystery. But the present is a gift. That is why it is called a present. And we are eternally grateful to Grace Kennedy Foundation, Dr. Fred Kennedy, and his wonderful staff for this package here today. And I invite Jamaica and the world to open the Grace Kennedy Foundation package. Thank you.